Poinsettia, Chapter 30. O come, all ye faithful, joyful and triumphant. O come ye to Bethlehem. The churchgoers outside were walking about rather early to give praise and sing carols in the cold and snowy streets. They passed Gavin's mansion. They pointed at the silk poinsettias wrapped in the garland about the wrought iron spikes of his gate. It was closed. Even if they were not invited in, the lord of the manor had given them delicious eye candy to feast upon as they passed. Inside, the fires were lit and the drapes were drawn shut. Not only did it promise the lord and his home the privacy he desired, but it also kept out the sun. It was quite a bright and glorious morning after all. Even if Gavin could not enjoy the happenings out there, he could still make it joyous in here with his own capabilities. As for the lord, Gavin groaned and lay slumped over the table. He barely held on to a coffee mug that had long since gone cold. The exhaustion in him was evident. "Have you been awake all night?" Laura asked with a chuckle as she passed him. She had found his predicament to be slightly amusing. His hair was straying from the ribbon that was to maintain it. He looked rather silly when he was unkempt. "Uh-huh," he replied. "Go to bed," she offered. "Your hair is going mad. It looks like you're wearing a wig." "Huh?" He perked and reached up to feel the stray hairs. He let out a small whine and pulled the ribbon from his hair entirely. He smoothed it all back until it was more appropriate according to his standards and tied the ribbon once more. "I cannot sleep now. I am waiting." "Waiting?" she repeated. "Waiting for?" The romping and laughter quickly sounded from the upstairs. The two of them looked up at the ceiling overhead. Laughter came from Laura, and she brought a hand to her face to not reveal her open mouth to him. "Oh, them. You've grown awfully attached to her, haven't you?" "She reminds me of both my late wife and daughter," he admitted. "The house feels different with a child like her in it. She is quite an extraordinary child." She nodded before the call came from those not yet before them. "Go, Angus, go!" Danny cheered, as he practically galloped down the stairs with her clung firmly to his back. She was still in the nightgown Gavin had let her wear. Angus, on the other hand, was fully dressed in his usual manner and ready to greet the day as his master saw fit. "Top of the morning to you both," he belted out to the two of them. "Good morning, Mr. Gavin. You too, Mrs. Laura," Danny added. "Merry Christmas," Gavin greeted calmly. "Did you and Bumblebee sleep well?" "The best sleep ever," she replied. "Bumblebee, too. We love it here." "I'm glad." "Your lordship, where are our presents?" Angus suddenly asked, with arms crossed impatiently over his chest. "I'm letting you live here another year," Gavin sighed. "Isn't that more than enough?" The girls couldn't help but laugh. As dry as that interaction had been, it was clear to them that humor was intended. Even if those on the outside were not entirely positive, the girls had come to learn rather quickly that the pair were quite close. The vampire finally chuckled. "I've been very generous lately. However, I am a kind man, and I suppose I could show a little more generosity." He smiled at Danny and beckoned for her to come closer to him. She was obedient. He then pointed towards the large tree. "Go on, then. Go and see for yourself what you have gotten." Danny cocked her head to the side a moment. She considered his words and the tree before she approached it. He had been so good to her already, and she appreciated every bit of it. She didn't ask for nor really want anything more from him. She would not demand such things from him. However, he had gone out of his way, apparently to please her further. She examined the boxes under the tree. There weren't very many, but there were enough. Many indeed had her name on them. She couldn't remember the last time she had gotten Christmas presents. She knelt down and pulled one of the boxes closer to her. She looked back towards Gavin, almost as if to be sure that she had his permission. He said nothing, but seemed to have that thoughtful smile fixed on his face, so it had to be all right. She began to pull on the brightly colored paper and fancy ribbon until the gift inside was exposed. "Oh, Mr. Gavin!" she gasped and brought her hands to her cheeks in surprise. The doll-like dress that she had worn on her last visit, it was now in her hands as a gift to her. It even came with the accessories she so adored. Even the hat, the gloves, and the parasol were all there. As for the last of her presents, she retrieved a small box from under the tree and opened it to reveal an adorable teddy bear-sized suit and gray cap. She cheered and pulled Bumblebee into her lap to allow him to see. "Look, Bumblebee! Look what you got for Christmas! You got new clothes! You'll look absolutely smart and dapper in these." She hugged him close. "This is the best Christmas ever." She scrambled to her feet and nearly tackled Gavin in his seat to hug him. "Thanks a whole lot a bunch, Mr. Gavin." He continued to smile warmly and placed a hand affectionately on her head. Laura and Angus couldn't hide their smiles either. He was pleased that she was pleased. The others were simply pleased that they were pleased. The feeling of bringing joy to a child was unmatched. No matter how many times he did it, it never got old. That evening, Danny and Bumblebee donned their new clothes and hopped down the stairs. They met the adults at the door that would lead them to the dining room. She gave the cutest of curtsies. Laura replied duly with a sophisticated curtsy of her own. Gavin, being the gentleman, gave her a deep and respectful bow. Angus gave a smaller bow. He then winked at her and crossed his ankles. He then dipped with a comical curtsy of his own, giving his kilt a little tug. Danny giggled at his antics. "Good evening, sirs and madam," she greeted. "Are you hungry, Will Ass?" Angus asked. "I sure am," she declared, "and Bumblebee is so hungry that he could eat a whole horse." "A whole horse?" Gavin questioned. "Oh my, that is a really big appetite. I sure hope we have enough food." Danny giggled as Laura took her hand in hers and led her into the dining room. Inside was the grandest smorgasbord that could ever be imagined. It was a spread fit for royalty. "Oh, wow!" she gasped. "This really is more food than I could ever eat, even with Bumblebee." "Then may you greatly enjoy it, my dear," Gavin insisted. He placed a hand on her back with a small amount of force to ensure she knew she was free to help herself to anything she liked. "Take a seat and let us enjoy all these marvelous foods." Even at his insistence, Danny hesitated. "Wait! Something isn't right." This prevented the others from taking their seats. Danny tugged on Angus's clothing. He crouched down so that she could whisper in his ear. He gave an affirming nod and left them for a few moments. He returned with a handful of silk poinsettias. He approached Gavin and invited himself to pin one on his lapel. He duly pinned one on himself. He then handed one to Laura for her to pin on herself. He dared not invite himself to touch her personal person. Of course, he also placed one in Danny's hair, and a small one was pinned onto Bumblebee's lapel. "There we go." "That's better," she cheered. "Now we're all dressed right." "You're something else," Gavin chuckled. "Absolutely amazing." He came behind Laura and pulled out her chair for her. Angus pulled out another chair and motioned his head for her to come closer. Both girls were seated. The men took their seats. Gavin, of course, at the head of the banquet table. Gavin, of course, at the head of the grand banquet table. The food was cut and served, and it was very much enjoyed. Danny lacked the etiquette and elegance of a noble child. It didn't seem to bother anyone, though. They were simply happy to have her, and her inexperience was easily forgiven. If anything, it offered more amusement than offense. She just wanted to taste everything, eat everything. Of course, that was impossible for her little belly. It was impossible for the big bellies. Still, she did her best. She was also careful, while stuffing her face, to be mindful of her movement. After all, she did not want to dirty her new dress. "Everything is so delicious. I wish I could eat forever." "It's a bit of a pity that we grow full on such a bountiful spread, isn't it?" Gavin replied. "Would it be all right to take some home with me?" she asked. "I suppose we could arrange that," he said, "if that is what you want." "Are you enjoying your Christmas, Danny?" Angus finally asked. "Of course, a whole lot of bunches." "Do you like your presents?" Laura chimed in. "Oh, yes," she declared. "We really do. Bumblebee and me are really happy, and we made a really important decision." "Oh, and what might that be, darling?" the woman asked curiously. "We've decided that we want to be buried in these clothes." Gavin choked on the wine he had been drinking. He put the glass down and turned his head away as he coughed. Angus simply watched sadly, and Laura hurried to pat Gavin on his back to assist with his choking issue. He was finally able to regain himself and loudly cleared his throat. He wiped away a few tears that had formed during the struggle. He glanced over towards the child. She didn't even seem to realize the weight of her words. She smiled with such confidence and pride, nowhere near as hurt by them as the others. Gavin lowered his head sadly and stared absently at his plate. Why did she have to talk like that? Why? On the one hand, it was admirable that Danny would accept her fate and take advantage of the life that she had left. He knew so few people with that kind of spirit. He certainly hadn't been one of them in his time. Yet to hear a child speak so confidently about death, her own death, it upset him. It made him feel so helpless and frightened and useless. Why couldn't she understand? But then if she did, she wouldn't be the same amazing Danny with an appreciation for life. No, it likely would not be like that if she thought like a regular child. Mr. Gavin, are you okay? Huh? He perked. Oh, yes. I'm sorry, forgive me. I suppose I just got lost in thought. He forced a smile onto his face to prevent worrying her. You certainly look like an angel in that dress. You don't have to be sad for me, Mr. Gavin, she assured him. It's all right. Be happy. You made me happy. It's been like a big adventure. It was really neat. You're a special child, Danny, he replied. Your courage astounds me. Maybe we can put a painting of me and Bumblebee in the hospital, too, she suggested. You always think so big, Laura laughed. I don't know how much time I have exactly, she said. I can't afford to think small. How to the mouth of babes, Angus laughed. I figured you for being born to be a philosopher or a writer. Something smart. You see such a big picture for having such wee eyes. She gave a firm nod to that statement. She really had nothing more to add to it. He had said it all just fine.